And we are delighted to welcome in Justin Laurence from Crain Chicago Business. Had a phenomenal story on breaking down this contact between the mayor and the Bears. And the Bears have really sort of portrayed it differently maybe than it was. And we know what happened with legislators in Illinois, and we know the Bears may be leaving the state. Justin, thanks a ton for coming in. And
thanks for being here.
Of course. Yeah.
You did a terrific job with the story. We had talked about this week.
Yes.
It's uncanny because you were already working on this. We talked yesterday about, you know what we need here? We need somebody to FOIA the city.
Yes.
And to get the documented conversations on the record. You did exactly that. Everything that you had was impeccably reported and backed up and sourced. So let's start there. 6 phone calls between the Bears general counsel and the city's general counsel. Mm-hmm. What was the biggest thing you think that came out of those, and what did that signify to you?
I mean, to me, what came out of that is, and to be clear, we have the scheduled calls, on her schedule. It doesn't have notes of the, details of the calls. But, when this first happened 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I was speaking to legislators, and some of them were downplaying it. Hey, I spoke to the Bears or representatives for the Bears, and they told me there was one meeting. It was about our existing lease at Soldier Field. The city brought up a new stadium, and it kind of angered us, and that was that. And at the time, the city was saying, no, they didn't say exactly how many, but there was multiple meetings. And, my first thought, I filed a FOIA that day, because that takes time. Yeah. Let's see what we can get here. And, it came back 6 meetings in April. I don't have any hard evidence of this. This is why it quit. But, that last meeting was on April 22nd, the same day the House passed something that the Bears weren't fully happy with, but started to get the ball rolling to help them move to Arlington Heights. And the key takeaway for me is, Bill Cunningham, Senator Bill Cunningham, Representative Cam Buckner, those two are on record. I've spoken to other people involved in ostensibly trying to help the Bears get something done in Arlington Heights. And they told me at the time, and they've told me since this came out, they were told there was one meeting, it was downplayed. And so just the fact that they were misled about the number of meetings angered them and kind of showed the amount of we heard about a lot of distrust between lawmakers and Bears this whole time, and I think that's evidence of it. The Bears still insist it was about the lease, and I don't have hard proof. I don't have a readout of the calls, but the city argues against that, and at least on the point of the number of meetings, the city has been the one telling the truth on that.
So I think what the conclusion is, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it fair to surmise from your reporting that this got in the way of any kind of legislation meaningful or any kind of deal being struck in Arlington Heights? That if you want to look at this relationship continuing, it created distrust in the Bears, which led to eventually problems in this legislation being passed so they could start making plans for Arlington Heights.
Well, yeah, and specifically with lawmakers from the Chicago delegation,
right,
who had been, for 3 years, we all knew that was the obstacle. Why are lawmakers who represent Chicago residents going to vote to send them elsewhere? And what Bill Cunningham has said, and I've been told this by other sources, labor's really involved in pushing this. The trade unions, they want the jobs that come with construction, right?
Sure.
And what I was told, what I've learned is there was some momentum in getting some Chicago lawmakers reluctantly around to the idea of, well, this is all there is. It's Arlington Heights or Indiana. I want some other things. I want to see some other things in the bill, but reluctantly on board to vote for that. And Bill Cunningham said he lost votes when Mayor Johnson went down there and told lawmakers, no, we've been meeting with the city. That's absolutely still an option. I want to throw a whole lot of caveats on the city's option too, and I hope that came across in the story. It got pushed down once we got the FOIA, but the mayor is out with a plan, and he says the new Senate proposal is similar to his, but his plan relies on $1 billion, or roughly $900 million
Yes.
in subsidies that the state has to approve, and they've said we're not doing that.
And the state is not on board with this.
They're not on
so
board
it's a
with
great
it.
idea for Chicago, unless the governor isn't in favor, and we know that's likely to be the case.
It would look at this point, if they did an about face and approved that, and Governor J.B. Pritzker signed it, that would be. He would have a lot of explaining to do, because he has said from the start that's a non-starter.
You know, we also talked to Senator Cunningham. We had him on, and he told us how difficult this would be for the state to finance the moving from one municipality, Chicago, to another, Arlington Heights. And there was already a difficulty in that. And then with the Bears and the word of these meetings getting out, it was almost, there's a certain naivety to the Bears in terms of their understanding of what that process is. And we've talked about other places where a team has moved, whether it be across state lines or within a different state. For instance, California, the Niners moved to Santa Clara because they got cooperation from the municipality of Santa Clara. They didn't get the state okaying that. So when you have lawmakers living in Chicago reluctant to be a part of the Bears moving somewhere else, it was almost like the Indiana threat fueled, okay, we got to do something here, we're going to lose them. And then when you give a hint of hope, of course you're going to lose votes. You can't go about it that way. And the frustration level from the lawmakers really, it was amazing to think that the Bears, and we were told by a couple of reporters, they had good lobbyists there. They never listened to anybody.
That's what they've said. That's what's kind of come out of it. Like I cover Chicago City Hall more so than Springfield, but I can tell you if you're asking alderman, if you're asking a lawmaker, a politician to take a hard vote, you can't give them any outs. You can't give them any reason to say, no, I can't do this. And for some, it's, look, I think maybe Chicago's back in the mix. So let's figure something out that could affect that happening. And that's what the Senate did. They created this new framework to put, every municipality, or at least not every, but Chicago and Arlington Heights could create this new stadium authority framework, which is kind of a traditional stadium deal.
Yes.
It's publicly owned, whether or not who pays for it, it's publicly owned, and there's a share of revenue, and it's more of a traditional model than what they were asking for. And it just, I can't tell you why it didn't go on the board or didn't get publicly unveiled until 11. I wrote the story about what we are hearing about this framework overnight, Saturday into Sunday. And at the time, Cunningham was saying we're hopeful to get something out in the morning, and that never came. I think part of it is, one, building up support for it, and then two, they were passing a budget, and I think it would have been problematic to push that out and really try to rally people behind it, especially progressives who were asking for things in the budget without them knowing that what they wanted in the budget was actually going to be in there.
Joined by Justin Laurence from Crain's Chicago, who did a terrific story. You want to check it out at chicagobusiness.com. It is information that we didn't have previously confirmed about the 6 phone calls between the Bears and the city up until April 22nd. As thorough as you were in reporting that, now we are here. Now we are on the Friday after the Sunday, and it's been a long week of silence. This is what I think could happen. This is, I think, where we are. Our reporting, my reporting. The Bears were looking for a unanimous decision with their board, 7 members of the board.
Yes.
The McCaskies, Kevin Warren, and Pat Ryan. If they achieve a unanimous decision, they will go one direction or the other. But the thought is they're voting on Indiana. And if they get a unanimous decision this weekend, as early as today, I expect them to decide to go to Indiana. That would be a huge story in Chicago, a huge day for the Bears and Northwest Indiana. What does your reporting tell you in terms of a timeline? And if that were to be the case, who do you hold most responsible for us arriving at this situation now?
Well, I mean, and what's supporting the idea that it's Indiana is, remember, they've said they want to make the decision. We have two viable options, and one of them, nothing happened in Springfield to make Arlington Heights better, and they have this, at least a framework in Indiana. So, I would think it's likely that they put out something. And what I want to know, though, is what is that? Is it a binding contract with penalties if they back out, or is it something less than that? And then we'll have to look at, do they put up their Arlington Heights property for sale? Do they fire their Springfield, the horde of lobbyists they have down there? So we want to know, what is more happening.
They might have to transfer them to Indianapolis.
Yeah, they'll have to. Yeah, they're probably getting their registrations in order. But
that is very interesting the way you word that. Like, how binding is the agreement? Yeah. Because if I'm the state of Indiana, I do not want to give any wiggle room to a group that seems reluctant to go there and may have been using me as a party to their pressuring.
And might not be
Illinois.
the most trustworthy.
And by the way, they're known to lie to people.
I mean, that's okay. That's an editorial comment, but
joking.
Yeah, but it's a really interesting way to put it. And you do wonder, because we have seen situations in the NFL where in the late 90s, Robert Kraft and the New England Patriots struck a deal in Hartford, had the ceremony, had the process stamp of approval officially, and then backed out because of testing issues along the way. They end up in Foxborough. Not to suggest that's going to happen, but there are some still hurdles to clear.
Oh, absolutely. The framework that Indiana, the state lawmakers put forward, there's a Northwest Indiana Stadium Authority that will own the stadium. The Bears will put in money to it, but there's a lot of local taxes that were put, into that haven't been approved yet. So, and I'm not saying they won't be. I think the Bears are bullish that they were, and certainly the Governor Braun is bullish that they'll be done. But you ask, you ask politicians to tax their residents, and it's never a sure thing. There's a hotel tax, a restaurant tax, and if they fully commit to Indiana, then they don't have sensibly the leverage of maybe we'll stay in Illinois. And someone told me a long time ago in this that these stadium deals are written in chapters, right? So I think we are entering the next chapter, and that, to me, that does not close the book, that does not finalize something. And I don't know what, I've been asking people, is it like, do they have to have a Crain on the site in Indiana? Do they have to go into the bond market? And what is it? Some people say they'll believe it when there's they schedule a game there. I don't know. But all signs point to some sort of forward-looking statement announcement in Indiana.
Is it your understanding, and I'm just curious what lawmakers have told you about the EPA stuff?
Mm-hmm.
We've talked to people, and there's a belief that they're ready to go, but you read that Tribune story, the slag heap story, the smelting thing, and you wonder if that is all as smooth as possible. Is that all done? Is that all tied up?
Yeah, according to the Hammond mayor,
yes,
the Bears are comfortable. He's comfortable. The Bears are comfortable. That's an area where the Tribune did a good job looking at that. It's like we just kind of have. I don't. There's been no outside independent analysis, so we kind of have to trust what they're saying on that. But that is the sort of thing I think. Even if they were to sign a contract, I would imagine there's an out clause if we find that we can't build there, obviously. So. There's a lot of things to happen, and I wouldn't be shocked even if they say they're going to Indiana. One of us is reporting. I only saw Kevin Warren at City Hall on August 7th or something. Just to keep the lines of dialogue open, I guess.
All right, Justin, you cover City Hall, but you're definitely familiar with statewide politics. You're down in Springfield, and you understand the gravity of the situation as it pertains to Governor Pritzker and his political future. If the Bears, as we have discussed, are eventually, as early as today, maybe as late as next week, going to shift their focus to Indiana and make a commitment, however binding it is. Whose political legacy, whose legacy in general is damaged the most by this in Chicago or in Illinois?
To the extent that anyone's is, I do think it's probably the governor. It's on his watch, and as much as the legislators are involved in that, there's so many of them, it kind of dilutes the impact on their own careers. I think he would say, and he will quickly pivot to, look, they wanted $1 billion from us, and I said no. They wanted Indiana gave, host, the way he phrased it is Indiana gave them the world, and I said no. So he will try, and I think that will work with some people. I think a lot of the nuance of all that is just lost, and for a lot of people, it's just, how could you lose the team? And it won't go beyond that. When there's political mailers go out and legislators they'll just say Bill Cunningham lost the Bears, and it doesn't have to say anything else, right? I think the mayor, Mayor Johnson, he's positioning himself to say, I was always bullish and always tried to keep them in Chicago. I always fought for Chicagoans. But at the same time, he put forward a plan that never had a good chance of passing in Springfield, and he wasn't able to convince anybody to take another look at it. So I think
it also wasn't a plan. I mean, it was more theoretical than actual plan. You know what I'm saying? Oh, well, we're going to build this, and then you give that, and then they'll give that. That was never going to happen. And the other thing is, the Friends of the Lake, were they ever going to let's build a casino?
Yeah, like 2 years ago, I mean, the Bears were all gung-ho on this. So at the time, they all believed, they could overcome a potential lawsuit, even if it took a year in court, right? So they, I don't know. There's a lot of inertia in Illinois politics to not do anything or to not do anything different and say we're working on other stuff. I think there is why couldn't everybody just get in the room sooner? They were in the room, but a broader coalition of lawmakers to hear out what all the concerns are and kind of get the momentum towards trying to do something if that's what they wanted to do sooner.
Fascinating. Justin, thank you. We appreciate you
Great
coming
job.
in. Really
great reporting.
Work.
Thank
Absolutely.
you for coming in here and talking about it and backing it up. And I think that the story continues.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on in another 6 months when there's a new chapter. So.